Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and a warm welcome to the NTU-SBF Center for African Studies African Angle Breakfast Series. This morning, it will be about supporting construction in Africa, lessons for SMEs from the Aluzinc Asia experience. So without further ado, may I invite the Center for African Studies Center Director, Mr. Johan Berger, to say a few words. Mr. Berger, please.
Thank you, Eileen. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. First of all, a Happy New Year for 2017. May it be a prosperous year to us all. And I think one of these days it is Chinese New Year. It is the year of the rooster. So happy Chinese New Year to you all as well. Somewhat early, but rather early than late. Ladies and gentlemen, as you know, we started off last year with this breakfast series, The African Angle, to convey and share knowledge and experience on Africa with people interested in Africa. And I've told you before, I'm unashamedly an African optimist in spite of what we frequently see to be problem areas. The African Angle series so far, we started off, if I can recap, with a broad overview when we had two high commissioners from Africa saying this is what their experience about Africa is. The second one, we had a macro view on scenarios, using scenarios to build ideas of what the future will hold. And then the two thereafter had to do with food and food processing, food distribution and food processing. Today we're looking at a bit of another industry. One of the main trends that we find in Africa is one of urbanization. Slowly but surely, more and more Africans are leaving the rural areas and moving into the urban areas, which obviously puts a lot of pressure on the facilities, on infrastructure. Housing is a major issue, office buildings, you name it. So I thought it would be nice to hear from somebody that has a different angle, not in the food environment. Feeding Africa is very important, but housing Africa in various ways, not only housing per se, but also construction and infrastructure in general. And we were fortunate enough to get Naveen Ravindran, who is the Vice President Sales of Aluzinc Asia, who has a passion for Africa as well, to share his insights and his experience. He's not going to talk for 45 minutes this morning, which gives us more time to ask questions and for him to answer. So I've always believed the more time you give people to answer questions, the more probably we get to know what we want to hear and not what he thinks we want to hear. So please use the opportunity that you have available after his talk to then ask the necessary questions. He is also passionate about the issue of business culture and culture in general in Africa, if you were to be interested in that environment. I think without further ado, then I'm going to ask Naveen. Naveen, thank you so much. We really appreciate your willingness to come and share your morning and your insights with us. Over to you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. At the onset, let me thank NTU-SBF Center for African Studies for giving me this opportunity to share my experience today. I have not tried to frame any kind of a presentation which will give you a detailed description about the construction industry in Africa or the way business is done in Africa. What I have tried to present over here is my personal experience over the last 15 years in Africa, working in Africa, and the experience of Aluzinc Asia that was developed with the focus of Africa in mind. Just to start the presentation, what's Aluzinc way? That was a question that was asked to me in terms of trying to give a background of what the presentation will be all about. Just to give you a background about Aluzinc Asia, we are an 8-year-old company. We are a GTP company based here in Singapore. The operation started in 2007-8 with the primary activity being Africa-centric. What we do is we supply finished steel material and semi-finished steel material which is used for making houses. So very plainly speaking, all the shanties that you see across the African countries, all the good bungalows that you see across African countries, they all have a roof, which is primarily the steel roof. And that is something which we supply by representing the factories in India, China, Japan, Vietnam. And we take out their capacities and go and sell it in the markets assigned in Africa. We have a sizable presence in South America also and Southeast Asia, but since the topic of the discussion today is focused on Africa, I will restrict the activities of Aluzinc Asia from the African perspective. What I started off is something which Mr. Berger just said a few minutes back, the culture. That is one differentiating factor that I have seen, which makes or breaks your, if I can say, your entry into Africa. It's very important for you to understand what is Africa all about. I mean, we just can't club the whole continent into one block and say that's Africa. It's very similar to what we see in India. Every 100 kilometers, the landscape changes, the lifestyle changes, the food habits change. It's the same in Africa. I mean, what you see in one part of Ghana may not be true in the other part of Ghana. What you may see in the north of Nigeria may not be true in terms of the customs and style that you may see in the south of Nigeria. So culture is something which we have focused a lot about. And why am I giving the background of culture is because Aluzinc Asia was formed by a group of 4 or 5 people who had some exposure into Africa. And in 2008, when we felt that, okay, let's start a business, and see how we can utilize our experience and make some money. We were fortunate enough to get acquainted with and today form a partnership with the Chandaria family. And the main reason why I'm emphasizing on the Chandaria family is because it gave us a sense of purpose. We were all driven by the blood, the young blood, that let's go and do something big and make some money, do an IPO, etc., all those things. But we didn't have a purpose. We just knew relationships. We had built relationships over the years. We had exposure across the continent, right from Senegal in the west to Ethiopia in the east, Egypt in the north to South Africa in the south. And what the Chandaria family helped us was to define a purpose, and that actually helped us survive in Africa. To give you a background about the Chandaria family, they've been in the Africa sector for close to a century today, and they form a kind of a partnership with us, which is more in terms of looking at what can we give back to the society than when we are taking something away from the society. And this aspect of looking at business from the social economic perspective has helped us make money in Africa. A lot of businesses, when they venture into Africa, they go on a hop-on, hop-off kind of an approach. Let's go try and then come back. If not, fine, let's leave it. It's too difficult. I've attended various forums over here where the SMEs have come back and said that it's too difficult, it's not workable. Of course, there are ways. Persistence is something which you need to work on. What we have done with this kind of a framework that we got from the stakeholders is that we were able to collaborate, we were able to cultivate, we were able to develop competent people who can develop Africa for us, who can develop the international trade business for us. And it has worked well for us in terms of recruiting people in the market, representing us in the market, and of course, local Singaporeans over here who are working with us in the office, on a day-to-day basis, handling the African customers. Why is it that one thing that comes out from this is that you need to have a good partner who understands Africa. And we were fortunate enough to have the Chandaria family, as I said. And what it helped us was that it helped us to do business with a purpose, one. Second, it helped us to be on the right side of the law, which is so difficult. We all know what Africa is. And to do business and to do it the right way is equally challenging. And I will just sum it up in terms of what the Chandaria family is. It's basically a trust. The Chandaria family is owned by a family which is linked to the trust. And it's a very good model which was even done, which was basically a case study in one of the B schools in terms of how businesses which is run by a trust can make money and also can attract professionals to work for them. I'll just leave the essence of our purpose with what one of the stakeholders had to say. sorry, it's not linked, so I need to go back to the video.
Success is not only what is required. There are many, many more successful people. Unless you make a difference in the lives of the people you work with, in the lives of the people you live in the society that you live in the country that you live in, and ultimately the globe that you are, unless you can make a difference in those lives, success cannot be created significantly.
And that's what something which drives us on a daily basis. We always try to see that whenever we are involved in building a relationship with a customer or with a supplier, there is a sense of purpose. There is something where we share. We are looking at avenues where we are able to give back to our stakeholders, which is basically internally in the company, outside the company, and society in general. And one of the reasons why we thought this approach made sense for us was because we were in the housing industry. We were going to cater to the lowest segment of the people in the society for whom building a house is basically kind of an activity in itself. It's not the kind of an activity where you just build a house and move in. It takes months. They accumulate the money. They basically go in on a step-to-step process where they build the house. Same is the case in terms of the rich man in Africa. For him, it's basically a status symbol to have a big house with a beautiful roof on his head. We don't want to have a situation where when he walks into his house 2 years from the time it is been constructed, the roof is basically gone. It's rusted or faded. So we had this challenge in terms of being competitive in the market, but at the same time, also provide value for money in terms of product attributes, in terms of services, in terms of financing those kind of transactions. And all these things was possible because we had the right partners with us who could guide us in terms of doing business in Africa. The second thing, basically, we can term it the way you want it. I would term it as excellence, but internally we call it small improvements. Some people call it innovation, some people call it the room for excellence. What we have done and what we have identified as a core of our business is basically small improvements in everything that we do. It starts with the leadership at the top, right from, of course, the board, and then the professionals who are in the organization, going on to the way we do the budgeting activity. When we do the budgeting activity into a market like Africa, it's so challenging. There is no statistics that's available in terms of what is the addressable market size in a country. And if X is the market addressable size in a country, how are you going to tap 50% of those addressable customers? And if 50% addressable customers are your so-called target segment, then how are you going to basically go and service those 50% and make money? Because you also have the issues of payment, you have risk, you have issues in terms of logistics. So budgeting is something which needs to be realistic. Budgeting is something which has to be backed by everybody in the organization. And hence what we do is we work on a more of a consensus-based budgeting rather than top-down driven activity. We take a lot of feedback from the market, that is our frontline sales managers who try and give regular information on a day-to-day basis in terms of what's happening, what are the trends, what is good, what is not good. Like we just missed the depreciation of the Ghana cedis just because of the timely information that we received from our sales team on the devaluation that was expected in 2015. So that's just a normal example. We also stopped our sales into South Africa for the last 3 months, primarily because of this ambiguity in terms of a safeguard duty that's coming in for all kind of imports of construction-related material to protect the local environment. So these are the issues that can only be addressed more from your gut feeling and more with respect to trusting someone who are basically your ears and eyes on the ground, and not in terms of someone who sits over here and try to give a projection based on what are his pressures to his stakeholders or his shareholders. Employee focus, customer supply focus, these are all something which work together in terms of building a constant excellence for us internally and externally in Aluzinc Asia. whenever we look at a business, especially into Africa, it's expensive. What we do is, can we sustain that business? Can we scale that business? These are the only two parameters that we look at when it comes to approaching a market for business. You may have a situation where Ethiopia is having a population of 90 million people, in fact 100 million plus today. But can I do a sustainable business in Ethiopia? No, it's not possible because of the forex issues that I can't have my sales team giving me a month-on-month growth in Ethiopia today, primarily because I know that to get the payment out from Ethiopia, it takes a minimum 90-day credit lead time. So how am I going to have a month-on-month budget when I know that the buying pattern in Ethiopia itself is sporadic? But whenever the buying happens, it's huge. It depends on the kind of forex that is being allocated by the banks to the importer for him to go and buy. So I can't have a sales plan for Ethiopia, for example, where I know that there is a constraint in terms of importing into that country, though the population is 100 million plus. So ideally, by the normal 4 Ps of marketing and the other theoretical models that we do have, I cannot apply those to get a business plan in place. So what we look at is primarily just 2 factors. Can I sustain the business, however big or small? If it is small, is it adding to my bottom line? Is it doing some improvement internally for us in terms of the way forward 2 years from now or the next 4 years? And second is scalability. How do we scale a business in Africa? What we have seen is that building new markets on a regular basis is tough and very expensive. So we looked upon this opportunity of building the customers with whom we have formed an association by developing it into a relationship, and then taking it forward in terms of making him one of our biggest customers in the market. So there are instances in Senegal, in Burkina Faso and in Ghana where we have converted small retailers who would probably be importing $100,000 worth of cargo in each consignment and giving us probably $500,000 worth of business in a year to a manufacturer. He's backward integrated all the way into being a manufacturer where today probably is doing a business of 5 million plus with us. But it's happened over a period of 5-6 years where we have worked very closely with him. We have built the trust factor and supported him in terms of his endeavor to become a manufacturer. What has happened in that effort is that people around him have seen that there is this partner as a supplier in Aluzinc Asia who has helped him grow. And it helps us in terms of having a domino effect of attracting the other importers around the market. And then it becomes a question of do I need to support him? Do I need to support the other importers? That's something which we take on a market-to-market basis, because in some markets you need to have many importers to grow the market. In some markets you need to have just the 1 or 2 key importers just to build and get access to the entire market by itself. So ownership, to achieve all this, we need to give ownership across the hierarchy, and that's something which we have given, where a documentation support lady can also highlight something which is important for the organization. If there's something which is out in place from the normal rule and can be a risk factor for the organization, we highlight it in terms of it gets escalated, it gets flagged off immediately before it can become an issue. In the same way, from the market side, if the customer is expecting some kind of trend in his sale where he's saying that he's going to have more stock and hence his sales are going to go down, but at the same time there are some cargo which is already getting produced or on water, then how do we support him? Now all these things can happen only when you are involved in each and every stage of the supply chain, and that is the challenge that you have when you want to scale up the market. How well can you entrench yourself in each stage of the supply chain with your customer or in terms of your supplier? Because in both cases, you're trying to take the risk away from them, which is basically giving them the confidence that they can work more with you. So that is something which can be achieved only through transparency. You need to be as transparent as possible. So though we are basically a trader, I say, all our suppliers know the end users. I'm not talking about the end consumers, but the end users, the importers. We have no problem with that. The factories who supply, from where the supplies are done, they have the labels on the coils. The customers know them. There's no need for the customer to go and approach them directly because they know that there's somebody who is adding some value for them in between. That's Aluzinc Asia. So we've been as transparent as possible in our business approach, both with the suppliers and with our customers. On the way, in terms of trying to sustain and build the business, we have done small innovations. To give you an example, the roofing sheets in Ghana was not moving. I mean, we were fighting. Our products from Japan was just not moving compared to the Chinese products which was coming in. There was probably 30% difference in terms of the price factor. And how are we then to push in this product, which is a much superior product, but at the end of the day, it is serving the local farmer who basically just wants to have a roof on his head. It doesn't matter to him whether the roof is going to sustain for 1 year or 5 years, as long as he perceives it to be a good product. So it all became a question of how well can he perceive and not in terms of how well he wants a product. So we then went in for branding. We generally don't brand commodities, basically steel. Then how do we brand it? So we started putting it as, Cherry brand, which is coming in from Japan. So suddenly when the name Japan came in, the local importer perceived it to be much superior than the Chinese product that was coming in. Not to say that the Chinese products were bad, but the Japanese product had its own cost factor which was making it expensive. So we had to make that product relevant in the market and not just take that product away and go and buy the Chinese, the cheaper Chinese product. So we went ahead and developed a brand for the Japanese imports, which really created a segment in itself in the product. So you had the traditional Chinese supplies, you had the Indian, and then now you have created a new segment which was basically the Japanese segment. So everybody started identifying us with the Japanese, and it had its own pluses and minuses, but we made sure that we were able to scale that operation. So from a scenario where the Japanese were selling 500 tons of steel into Ghana per year, we were selling close to 20,000 tons. And that is in terms of revenue, it was close to $20 million. From $500,000, we're talking about $20 million of sales into that market. So from the risk perspective, as I said, we had some issue. We foresaw some issues in terms of devaluation, which is so common nowadays in Africa. And we went ahead and spoke to our bankers over here that, listen, we have an exposure that's coming in from Ghana because of the depreciation of the local CD that's happening. When you go open and transparent with your stakeholders, that includes the bankers, you get some kind of an advice, you get some kind of a relief. And that's exactly what happened. When we went and opened our cards to our bankers by telling them that there is a forex loss that we anticipate because of the depreciation, because all our invoicing are in dollars, but our receivable sales in the market are in local CDs. So the exchange loss is going to be huge. So that's when they suddenly came up with this non-deliverable forwards. It's something where you can peg the CD to the closest freely convertible currency, which is a US dollar, which gets pegged to the Sing dollars over here. To a large extent, we were able to save ourselves because of the NDF. Now that, we never knew about the NDF being available in Singapore, until we spoke to the bankers. So that's something which taught us the lesson that it's important that from the finance perspective, keep the bankers informed. They may be able to suggest us something at all point in time which can help us, save the risk exposure. How do you go about doing all these? Because on one side you are doing sales, on the other side you are trying to protect the risk. The third side, you are trying to control the suppliers who are basically demanding, because we're talking about big suppliers in China, Japan, Vietnam and India who are constantly pressurizing you to give them more and more volumes. So how do you then, take care of a situation where your attention is more in terms of developing the market and taking care of the risk and growing, scaling, sustaining, all those, doing it the right way, be on the right side of the law, take care of good governance. For all this is where the first slide which I showed is a sense of purpose comes in. You need to align your organization, which is basically your people, to the view that we all need to be together in terms of achieving our goal, which is the most important and most challenging aspect of our job. Most of the organization know what they're supposed to sell. Most of the organization, maybe to a large extent, organization know how they are supposed to sell. But I'm very sure a lot of organizations don't know why they are supposed to sell or why they are there in the business. The sense of purpose is just not there. And that's what probably differentiates an Apple from an Acer or another laptop, you know, because Apple has defined it the other way. They know why they are in the sense of why they are in business. They know that how they will be different from others. And once you have defined the why and the how, then answering the what in terms of what you want to sell is something which comes automatically. Most of the organizations try to work the other way around. They know what they're supposed to sell. Let's go and see how we can do that without answering the why aspect. And that is why you have most of the organization being, we were told that when we started up that listen, you have a 5-year horizon because 30% of the startups just vanish in 5 years. We have survived that. And one of the reasons for that is basically that you need to have a sense of purpose, why you are there in the business. For that, organization, policies, the alignment of people's personal aspiration is aligned to the organization's goals and aspirations, which takes time, which takes a lot of effort, and it yields results at the end of the day. Lastly, I won't talk much about the team spirit, teamwork, because we all know that we need to have we need to work together. But one thing that we have done is, we have tried to attract local talent as much as possible to work with us, because it's a critical factor. You can't sit there and understand how the Ghanaian or how the Ivorian is going to think while he's taking his decision, and compared to a local Ivorian or a local Senegalese who knows exactly what the thought processes are. Because end of the day, Africa is an amalgamation of tribes. Within Ghana itself, you may be talking to a Kofi, you may be talking to a Kwame, but for you it's just two names. But the fact of the matter is that a Kofi may come from a different tribe and a Kwame may come from a different tribe, and they exactly know where to draw the line in terms of their negotiations. For us, it's just another Ghanaian. We may not know in terms of what may be good for him, may not be good for the other person. And these sensitive issues are something which is possible only when you are as localized as possible. And that's something which we do on a consistent basis. We try to, localize the team. I'm always asked by my team, like, how are you going to do it? And I basically just illustrate them with this video, small video, which has had an impact on me in terms of how you want to address the team spirit.
Going back in. Still man out there. God damn. I go home. People ask me, hey, who? Why do you do it, man? Why? Some kind of war junkie? I won't say a goddamn word. Why? They won't understand. They won't understand why we do it. They won't understand it's about the index. That's it. That's all it is. Hey, don't even think about it, all right? I'm better on my own. Hey, we started a whole new week. It's Monday.
What this basically emphasizes is that you need to have mutual respect. When you try to localize your team, you cannot have the approach of, me sitting in Singapore office and I'm basically the corporate, and the team who's basically on the ground are basically team there to just get the orders. You need to have the sense of purpose percolating down the line all the way to the sales team who is based in the market. And that's where the cultural clash comes in. And that's where the challenge is for the organization to make an impact in Africa. Because if you start looking at Africa as a whole continent, you are basically giving away yourself from the word go. You just can't do that. And to make an impact into the markets that you have addressed as your potential market, you need to be sensitive to go ahead and build a team which you feel is equally on par, with you in your endeavor to achieve your goals. And that is something which I have seen consistently lacking with most of the organizations who have approached most of the markets. But since our discussions are in Africa, with respect to Africa, I've seen that on the ground itself. A warehouse manager in Africa, who's a local, he's responsible for your cargo, which is worth $1 billion. But you need to have the trust factor in him, rather than try to look at him as someone who needs to be looked onto, by keeping a guard behind him or putting a camera in his room to ensure that everything works as per what you want sitting over here in Singapore. Once you need to get over those inhibitions. Only when you get over those inhibitions is when you will be able to create a sense of trust. And it's only when you have the team on the ground that performs for you is when you will have a successful venture in Africa. Based on this background, what is the model that we have worked on for Africa? It's purely long-term profit. We are not here for the short-term gains. We are here to create an impact. We are here to ensure that as we have profits coming in, we are able to take care of our customers. We are able to take care of the suppliers in terms of the supplier taking out their allocations, representing them into markets like Africa where they don't want to go ahead on their own. In terms of the sales reach, where we go aggressively in the market. Today we are active in 28 countries in Africa, and we manage the risk. Sitting in Singapore, we have a risk team which handles most of the queries. We have learned from our mistakes. We have had cases where we have worked based on trust, but it's not yielded the result that we expected, and hence had some kind of an exposure. We have put risk in place today, risk management in place. We have improved our sourcing. It's better to work, just like how we are forming partnership in the market, we have formed partnerships with our supplier base. And it has helped us because you basically consolidate your buying with a few select suppliers, and it helps them also because you're improving their sales, and it helps us to negotiate better prices due to the volumes that we give to a select few suppliers. All this is supported with a strong management, strong shareholder support who understands your business. Today, if I walk into a local bank in Singapore, on my own and say that I want to do business in Africa, they don't know. They would not have the appetite to look at Africa. But if you walk in with a stakeholder or a shareholder who understands Africa and who's had a relationship with the bankers, it makes a difference. You basically then, and that's exactly what we got. When we made our business plan with Africa, we had to actually show the map where Ghana is, where Gambia is, where Nigeria is to our bankers. I'm talking about 8 years ago, before they could actually start accepting normal letter of credit, which is a relatively secured payment instrument. And of course, we encompass all this with ethics, governance, and a good code of conduct. How do we translate this into business? Non-asset based, asset based. We are still non-asset based to a large extent, where we focus a lot of our activities on trading, and where possible we do a warehousing and distribution model. Like in Nigeria today, what we have identified, Nigeria is, as a group itself, has a big presence. But we as Aluzinc Asia also have our own customers in Nigeria. Last 1 year we have seen the Naira just taking a hit big time, and it was affecting the exports into Nigeria primarily because of non-availability of US dollars. The parity between the bank rate and the market rate was so huge that it was not helping the importer to basically import. What we did then is that we had this customer with whom we have had a long relationship. We went ahead and formed an alliance with the customer, told him that we will give him the credit that is required in terms of pushing the material in the market. You stock the material and you sell it locally. Now our exposure is only with the forex, which we hedged over here, though it's expensive, but we hedged. But we were able to cover our costs in terms of hedging, our logistics, purely because there was a demand in the market. It was just that the importers did not have the US dollars to basically take the cargo out. So when we removed those two hurdles and we started putting the material on the ground and covered the exchange risk, we were able to move the volumes that we expected, and with good margins. So that's something which we are doing on and off in the markets. We have had case studies done in terms of going further front end, setting up a processing center with customers, but those are still in the pipeline. Nothing much has happened. What we have done in the interim is that we have gone and done workshops with the installers, basically the people who go and install, the architects and the installers who go and install the roof, who design the roof, and then advise the customer to go and buy the roofing sheets from the market. So we went and did workshops in various countries, trying to educate the installers and the architects in terms of how well can they use each roofing sheet from the cost point of view. So this is broadly how we have modeled our operations in terms of non-asset based and asset based. I would like to end my presentation by just talking about risk and opportunities. A lot of times we don't look at risk and opportunity awareness in the same breath. It's either risk or it is opportunity. And most of the time when you sit internally with your finance department and your shareholders, the discussion is always skewed towards one. It's not towards both in alignment. And that is something which we need to take care when it comes to Africa. You may have an opportunity in terms of a market, but what are the stakes in terms of the risk? How high are the stakes? Most of the risks that we have seen in the last 2 years are something which we call as a non-linear risk. We had a good presence in Guinea-Conakry until the Ebola crisis, and we had cargoes reaching the port. Customers had left the country. So these are something which nobody anticipated when we did our budgeting for Guinea-Conakry, or for that matter, the crisis that we are seeing in the north of Nigeria of late again, or the devaluation, or the problems with respect to forex in most of the countries which are oil dependent. These are some things which we have seen in the last 2 years and was not predicted while doing the budgeting activities. So most of these will be a common factor going forward, is what our estimate is. So when we do our budgeting today, we do with this opportunity awareness that, okay, there is this market, but these are the risks, and hence let's trim down our appetite for that market and look at somewhere else in terms of our growth potential. The reason being that you just don't want to exit the market. The cost of going back into the market is much higher than trying to develop a new market. So we would like to retain and be in the market as long as we can, without ensuring that we don't exit the market. So these are some of the points that I've just highlighted, and I can always share these slides with you later on, so that you can have some kind of your own analysis of the points that has been highlighted. To sum it up, all risk can be managed, but it comes at a price. And that is something which we need to understand internally in the organization also, so that when you propose a proposal to the customer or to your supplier, you need to understand that the cost is already included in those proposals. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, any questions? While you're thinking, I have one. You're looking at currently importing your product into Africa. We've had previous speakers here say that they either import food-wise or they process locally. If you go into South Africa, you have a ShopRite, you have a Pick n Pay, the Woolworths that try as quickly as possible to tap into local supply chains. Does Aluzinc have any sort of future plans of getting to a point in time where they would be manufacturing in Africa, or is that something that you're not contemplating?
No, I mean, considering that the group has its operations across Africa, we manufacture steel, and since the group is already present with its own manufacturing facilities, we would like to restrict our association in Africa to trading, to marketing, distribution. Maybe the way forward for us is distribution, where there can be some kind of an alignment in terms of the group's operations, the group's presence, because the group has a vast network of marketing setup. So maybe we can align it, but that's something which we have not thought about in a very serious way. But what discussions we have had internally is that the only way forward for us to be in Africa is to be in distribution. Like ShopRite, for example, we are the suppliers for ShopRite's steel distributor. So we are already there, but we are not there in terms of being the front of or in tandem with ShopRite as the supplier for ShopRite. We basically work a little behind the brand, if I can use a word, where we supply to the ShopRite's processing center, and they basically process steel or the Best Buy. They basically process the steel and then they distribute it across South Africa. So we work behind. The group has a retail chain, processing retail chain called Safintra across East Africa. I mean, right from Ethiopia all the way to South Africa, there is this brand called Safintra. And what they do is basically they import the coils, they process it, and then they distribute it as a brand across the countries. So you have a East Africa presence where they go ahead and distribute into the remote villages the roofing sheets and other products which are used in the housing segment. We supply to Safintra. We will not be there in terms of trying to compete with Safintra in the distribution. So we will be looking at aligning ourselves with people who already have a presence in Africa, because one step with all these kind of disruptions that we are seeing, in terms of communication, in terms of finance, one thing that will see a lot of consolidation is the supply chain. Companies that are in the supply chain business will start consolidating. You'll have shipping companies taking over trading companies. You'll have trading companies working in close tandem with shipping companies, because you see there's a lot of synergy there. You can save cost, you can build volumes. You will find shipping companies having bonded warehouses at various ports of destination. So use them as a bonded warehouse facility in the destination country to promote your products, rather than going on your own and trying to set up a warehouse. So we will be aligning ourselves more from the distribution point of view. Yes.
Any other questions, ladies and gentlemen?
Yes, I have a quick one. I just saw the last slide that you presented about the market risk and opportunity, and I was a bit surprised because I saw that Cameroon is one of the countries with the highest risk and higher risk and lower return.
Yes.
And I wanted to understand because this is a map given by EY.
That's right.
And I wanted to understand from your perspective,
yes,
from your presence in the ground, are you very comfortable with that? And how can you give us a bit?
Sure. The slide that I have put is something which I agree upon. To give you an example, Steel Mundi, which is one of the biggest reinsurer, you basically reinsure the credit that you give to your customers. So you have an importer in Cameroon called Aluzinc, for example. So he likes to buy everything on credit. So you need to insure the credit that you give him. So there are these credit insurance companies who reinsure the cargo for you. I mean, in 2015, the write-off by Steel Mundi only in Cameroon was $50 million, and primarily because of non-payments. So that has a cascading effect on the exporter, because his rating goes down. He's a guy who took the credit insurance on the importer in Cameroon. And what we have seen is that because of the turmoil in Nigeria and because of the oil situation, the oil pricing situation, Cameroon unfortunately is not being perceived as a market where you can go and have a good business dealing. A lot of projects are stalled. Not to say that this is the way it is going to be, because we have also seen the other side of Cameroon where we have seen a tremendous growth in the economy. But as we speak today, it is perceived as a high-risk country, yes. The funny thing is, most of the countries which are the French-speaking countries, we have not seen the CFA devalue for a very long time. I mean, on one side we are pressurizing the Chinese to devalue their currency. But it's a funny thing that the UMA, that is basically the French-speaking countries in the west of Africa, they have their currencies pegged to the euro, and it's been stable. It's been stable, fluctuating between a smaller band. compared to, let's say, the Nairas or the CDs or the Euro or the US dollars. So it all depends on where you want to go and what are your parameters of risk that you would like to look at. When we go, it's basically the counterparty risk that we look at most importantly, because country risk is something which to a large extent is beyond us. We need to be aware of it, but it's beyond us in terms of controlling it. Counterparty risk is basically your choice of doing business. So you need to have the responsibility of being associated with the right partners in the market. No point trying to make a sale knowing the fact that this guy is tricky till the last money comes back. Yeah, please.
In assessing customer credit risk, to what extent have you been able to rely on credit bureaus in Africa? And what have been the quality of insights that credit bureaus have been able to provide you? And what other approaches do you take?
Primarily, we don't give credit to the first-time buyers. What we do is we tend to form an association with the customers for a period of time, and we work with the letter of credit. One thing that works well for us is that the cost of financing in Singapore is much cheaper than the cost of financing in Africa. So what we do is that we tell them that why don't you give a 180-day USANS LC? All charges outside your country will be borne by us. So the bulk of the cost, which is basically the confirming bank in Europe or in the US, the advising bank in Singapore, the negotiating bank in Singapore, all charges are borne by us. And the only charge that he needs to pay is basically the charges for opening the LC in the country. But then we also face a challenge that for him the cost of opening the LC as we perceive is not the way it is, because it differs from customer to customer, bank to bank in the country. In some cases we have had to tell him that why don't you just pay us 10% deposit. When the cargo is ready, you start establishing the LC for 180 days. The reason being that for him, the interest component for the LC starts from the day he opens the LC. And for us, the lead time is from the time he opens the LC or from the time he confirms the order, it takes another 45 days for us to produce, another 45 days for it to reach. So 90 days is gone in terms of the manufacturing and the logistics. It's only after the 100th day that he gets the cargo and then he starts selling, then he gets the money to pay us back. So we try to push out the finance cost as closer as possible to the shipment time, but at the same time ensuring that we have some cover in place in the interim. So we presume that 10 to 20% should be okay in terms of covering the freight. In the worst case scenario, if he defaults, we need to divert the cargo, at least the freight component is taken care of. So it's very subjective in terms of how we analyze, but we don't give credit at the onset. You need to build a relationship with the customer. The guy who is coming to you asking for credit from the onset is asking for trouble. Either he's in trouble, where he's not getting credit from his current suppliers, or he's trying to basically, he's not taking you seriously. That's the way I would put it. I mean, there's no reason why he should come to you and ask for credit unless there is a win-win situation for both of us. So we, as a company, we don't give credit, but we still get business. So you have, it's like, okay, where you could have done 80% of his source of his imports, we probably do 20% to start with, but that's fine. It's important to build a relationship before you start opening up your cards and increasing your risk exposure with the customer or the market.
Sorry. Steve, you start and then
Hi, nice. Good to see you again. Just would like to revisit the risk of the currency. You mentioned the Francophone countries they peg to euro. What about the Anglophone countries? Do you face exchange rate fluctuation risk? That's question number one. Question number two is, do you face liquidity issues with your customers because we are trading in US dollar? Do they have difficulty getting US dollar for the payment?
Yes. The answer for both the question is yes. Answering the second question first, US dollar, it's a situation where we are seeing across Africa where the availability of US dollar is becoming an issue. And it's important to understand this parameter while you're entering the market. For example, gone are the days when if you had a big appetite and you wanted to push yourself into the African market, Nigeria was the first place to go. Today Nigeria is the last place probably anybody would dare to go. And the reason being that the risk is so high, where you will not get dollars for months before you can expect any kind of payments out. Not to say that people are not going into Nigeria. As I said, we made an entry into Nigeria because we understand Nigeria to some extent today, and we are able to cover the availability of US dollars by having a counter trade with the customer whom we are selling. Now that's something which is a business strategy which I can't put it across over here. But there are ways where you can mitigate or hedge yourself in terms of your exposure. In terms of the local currencies, across Africa it's been devalued. I mean, you name Mozambique, you name South Africa. South Africa is more volatile, I would say. It depends on what the president tells on that day. I mean, the whole thing changes the next day. So Mozambique, east of Africa to some extent, but West Africa, across Ghana, then the small countries across in the ECOWAS, we have seen depreciation of the currencies happening. Egypt, we have seen availability of dollars becoming a constraint for the importers. So yes, these are risks which are there, but these are risks which can be managed. You cannot go with this view that because this risk prevail, Africa is dangerous. You make more money when there is more risk. I mean, that's a way an entrepreneur should approach, but be informed about it. And once you are informed about it, then I think you will be more calculative in terms of addressing your risk parameters depending on the country or the customer you are with.
We have one more question. Time for one question.
Okay, I wanted to ask, your product, is it aluminium sheets?
It's basically this. It's primarily the steel.
Okay, the reason I'm saying I live in Ghana and Nigeria, so I know exactly what you're talking about. In Nigeria, it's more into aluminium sheets for roofs, housing, long spans, etc. You didn't quite talk about competition, because I think the issue is not just risk. You talked about scalability.
Yes.
Of it. Is the issue only risk or stiff competition? Johan was talking about local production. Many of these aluminium companies have they have factories, they're producing, etc. You are just into sales and perhaps. And from what I see, most when you go to the Lagos area, Lekki, all those high, it's more into aluminium roofing, and in Ghana as well. So I'm wondering how are you dealing with that?
What we do is over the years we have focused a lot on product differentiation. One of the points that we spoke about was continuous improvement or excellence. And to take that point into the product or the marketing sphere, what we have done is we keep differentiating our product. Let me illustrate this by, the normal shanties that you see across the world are basically made of steel which is coated with zinc. What we did is we replaced that product with a product which has got a coating of zinc and aluminium called zinc or Aluzinc. And that's how our name comes in. So what we did is that we are trying to benchmark a superior product, a relatively superior product, because aluminium has got better attributes in terms of corrosion resistant, being corrosion resistant. It's more reflective, so the house will be cooler inside. So all these attributes we differentiated the product attributes, and we pushed this product into the market, which compensated for the loss of sales that we had in the traditional galvanized coils, and we improved it with this product. Moving forward, we benchmarked the possibility of giving a colored roof at the price of a galvanized. So you're talking about benchmarking the galvanized, and then you're talking about giving a superior product which is a colored roof at a price relatively closer to the galvanized price. So the long span that you spoke about is something which traditionally used to be just a normal plain sheet, but today the long span is primarily a blue color sheet in most of the African countries. It's because we've been able to build this product in consultation with our suppliers and bring it down. The other product that we have done is basically we started embossing the material. End of the day you need to have a product which is basically sellable. And we sell in metric tons, but the end customer sells it in pieces. The farmer or the house owner, he basically walks in and says that I want to have a roof which is of so many square meters or square feet. And then based on the calculation, they draw the number of sheets that will be required.
So your product targets the lower segments of the market,
We
because
we do all the three. In fact, we also have products where we supply with a 25-year warranty. So those products come out of attributed plants in Vietnam and in Australia, where the customer is ready to pay the premium. And we are talking about premium which is like 200%, 300%. But there is a segment of that in Ghana or in Nigeria also, but more in Ghana, where the disposable income for the good quality high-end roofs is much more than in Nigeria. So Nigeria is taken, for the same segment in Nigeria, we see a lot of push from the aluminium product, because aluminium is perceived to be a superior product than steel. So you have a lot of these Nigerian customers who are buying the aluminium products, which they perceive as a very high-end product compared to the steel. While in Ghana, we don't see the aluminium going in. We see the high-end steel, which is still perceived as a good quality product and going into the market. So product differentiation is something which we worked on consistently.
Ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, that's all that we have time for.
Thank you very much.
Please join me in thanking from us.
Thank you
very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, that is then that for this morning. I would like just to sort of raise 2 points. First of all, on the back of this program, there would be a feedback form. If you'd be so kind to fill that in and have any suggestions, please don't hesitate. It gives us a better idea on how to better serve your needs. Then I would also like to give a heads up 2 things. First of all, on the 8th of March, we would be having a double workshop on that day. The morning session, we're looking at business culture negotiation, a workshop on that would be presented by faculty that have been or that have extensive business experience in Africa. And then the afternoon would be in due diligence and market intelligence development in Africa as well, again by faculty that have extensive experience in Africa. And then on our next breakfast session is also in March. I think it's the 10th of March, would be then, up until now, we've had people in Singapore going into Africa. We would then be having an Southeast Asian executive talking about building an African brand in Southeast Asia. And very specifically, we're looking at Nando's. I spoke about it the previous session that was here. How did Nando's build a brand for itself in Malaysia and in Singapore, and the challenges that they've met? We will be having the group's chief executive that would be here on then the 10th of March. I look forward to seeing you at these sessions, and from my side, thank you so much for your support. It is highly appreciated. All the best for the rest of the year. Thank you very much. Keep well.